In the heart of the state-of-the-art, at the dawn of the next stage in entertainment, you found no proscenium.
You have indeed found No Proscenium, the voice of everything immersive. I'm your host, Noah Nelson, and welcome to episode 402. This week on the show, Curtis Hickman, co-founder and chief creative officer of The Void, is here to talk about his new and quite excellent book, Hyperreality: The Art of Designing Impossible Experiences. Really, it's excellent. I've read the whole thing, and it's swiftly becoming a cornerstone in how I'm thinking about immersive work. But before we get into the interview, it's time for some quick thanks, starting with C Tickets, sponsor of this year's Next Stage Immersive Summit Making an Impact Pillar, who, thanks to that sponsorship, are bringing you all of NoPro for the next few weeks. C Tickets has proudly supported thousands of clients across the globe in areas as diverse as historic attractions like Stonehenge, immersive theater like the Burnt City, and important cultural touchstones like LA Pride. Thanks again to C Tickets for helping us with the big swing of the next stage this year. Of course, none of this is possible without our Patreon backers. And as we gear up for the fall, and with all the spooky season shenanigans and some ambitious long-term plans on the horizon, your continued support is more important than ever. This week, the ranks of our backers are joined by New Canvas and Lori Meeker, who are helping us fight the churn. But I gotta be frank, we need more. Every $5 a month backer gets us stronger. So we're on a campaign to take us from 418 backers up to 450, with our next milestone just 7 backers away at 425. And I want to see that happen in the next couple of weeks. If you rely on what we do and you're not a Patreon backer yet, please hit up patreon.com/noproscenium and make a $5 a month pledge. It not only powers the podcast and websites for NoPro and everything immersive, it also gets you into our member-only Discord. You'll find a whole community of creators and fans there. Backers can link their Patreon accounts to get access. If you're already a backer, help us spread the word. So many of you do, but a lot of you don't. Drop a review on iTunes or your podcatcher of choice and share the articles you find useful or the episodes of the podcast on your social media platform of choice. And there's so many to choose from. It helps immensely. We are always No Proscenium, except on Insta and on Threads, where we are No_Proscenium. But if you search No Proscenium, we'll turn up. It's such a mess. As always, big thanks to our sustaining backers, Samuel Mustry, Chris Woolman, Samantha Davison, Eric Shamlin, Elaine, Daryl, John Boulette, Jay Bushman, Jerome Joseph Gentis, Tom Leonetti McGuire, Kurt Collins, Wynn Thorne, Ryan, David Bassick, Richard Ayers, Lonnie Hands-On, Lecker the Cool, the Ministry of Peculiarities, and Jan Budman. And hey, we're also on the lookout for community partners who are up for working out special deals for our backers. Hit me up at noah@noproscenium.com for details. And with that, on with the show. Experienced designer and magician Curtis Hickman is best known to this audience as the co-founder and chief creative officer of The Void, the era-defining location-based entertainment experience platform that brought to life Star Wars in Secrets of the Empire, Jumanji in Reverse the Curse, and the haunting Nicodemus, Demon of Invanishment, amongst others, while using the term hyperreality to describe their work. Hyperreality is also the title of his new book, Hyperreality: The Art of Designing Impossible Experiences. Curtis, thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, it is my pleasure, Noah. Thank you for having me.
Why now with the book? It's 2023. Why at this particular moment have the book come out?
So I started writing the book at the very start of the pandemic. So as Void locations started shutting down, I started to think a lot about all this cool knowledge that we'd gained through brute force experience, as well as these laws that we would send to our partners that would explain sort of how we felt about experience design and how and why we approached experiences from a certain viewpoint. And I just thought it was just really cool stuff. And it always stuck in my head that I just wish that this book had existed when I'd first started, in immersive entertainment, because it would have really helped helped a lot of sort of the bruises and the mistakes that were made along the way. It would have really been a big value. And it was interesting. So I wanted to sort of get the knowledge out there. I wanted to be able to have people take advantage of the things that we'd learned. And I just had to go to the void and say, is it okay if I write this book? And it was, as you can imagine, kind of a big discussion among the powers that be, whether or not the book should ever exist at all, and what was proprietary knowledge, and what was the secret ingredients that they didn't want to reveal, and et cetera, et cetera. And ultimately, we came to a resolution or a compromise where there was a small set of things that they said, okay, yeah, we feel that this is proprietary and you cannot talk about this set of things, but anything outside of that, go for it. And that was awesome. And honestly, it was really awesome of them to allow me to do that. So I said, great. And I started writing, and it took this long to finish. It's a lot of stuff, a lot of
It's not a
thoughts to
small
organize.
book.
It is not a small book. No.
There's lots and lots of side notes, lots of them. Although I say that
Yeah.
people think I'm knocking it, and I don't. Like, this is literally, I was so happy to see margin notes because that is how my brain works.
Oh, good. It's not just me then. That's good.
No. Do you have okay, sorry everybody, nerding out. Do you have the Making Ghostbusters script, that shooting script thing?
No.
Oh my god, you don't know about, yeah, you of all
No.
people. So
Right?
I'll have to show, maybe, I don't know if my copy's close to hand. If it is, I'll drag it out when we're done. It was made in like the 80s, and it is like an early shooting. It is like a shooting script, or pre-shooting script of the original Ghostbusters. Tons of production art in it, lots of Bernie Wrightston stuff, lots of unused scenes, storyboards where you can see when John Candy was supposed to be Louis Tully. And the reason why I mention is that, like, this is the kinds of notes it uses, the side notes in the margins. It's maybe the single greatest, like, script book / making of a movie book ever made. And it was for
Oh, I got to check that
Ghostbusters.
out. That sounds awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you in particular should get your hands on it.
All
Anyway,
right.
the side notes made me think of it. Okay, sorry everybody. Footnote number 1 is done.
Yeah.
The I'm gonna jump ahead in my planned questions, which is, this idea of some stuff being proprietary. You don't give away all the Void secrets because of that, but you do dive deep on some, like redirected walking.
Yeah.
I know it's got to feel weird to the powers that be to have anything out there, but you, particularly, in your magician brain, does it feel weird for you to have some of your secrets out there in the world?
Yeah, magic's such a funny thing. You practice for hours and hours and hours so that nobody knows that you're doing something, right? It's like you're the exact opposite of a juggler or something. I mean, you practice things so that nobody knows that you can do those things. And so there's a bit of that, especially from the guest point of view. Obviously, there's a lot that I don't want the guests to know. But I also knew that the guest was never, your average Joe is never going to read this book. This is not the kind of thing that is going to hit the New York Times bestseller list. This is a book very focused on experienced designers and experienced design. And so that part wasn't worried about it. And so really the question was, is it okay, or I should be, is it okay for a magician to write a book for other magicians? And the answer is absolutely yes. And in fact, magicians are encouraged to get their information out there so we can kind of help each other. And there's sort of this unwritten law that magicians need money too. So it's okay if a magician wants to reveal his secrets, and especially to other magicians. And that's how I feel. And I talk a little bit about it in the book, but is that if you're reading this, odds are I consider you a magician of the immersive arts. And therefore I don't feel bad telling you these secrets.
Do you feel like these two art forms are either like twins or entwined or coming from like the same origin point? Because the funny thing about immersive to me is always that it pulls upon so many different disciplines. It has a lot of parents at the end of the day. But
Yeah.
how do you where do you think the resonance between the magical arts and immersive are?
I mean that I try to touch on that and explain that as saying that the magical part is essentially the illusory or illusionary aspects of experience design specifically, which is a very broad subject. And art there's so much illusion design in art that magic can't claim, right? Um, Things like trompe l'oeil. From a magician's point of view, it's like, oh, we could own that. Like that's trompe l'oeil. That's an aspect of magic design, but really it wasn't done by magicians. But it has that sort of a strange magical aspect to it. Likewise, things like forced perspective or other like illusion design techniques in experience design or theater design uh, are things that a magician might claim as being part of the magical arts. Others might say, "Oh, that's just part of art." And when it comes down to it, if maybe you're trying to make a realistic painting, and if that's your goal, then you're trying to create the illusion that these oils or chalk or whatever it is you're using, it looks more like a realistic rendering or a photo, if you will, of a mimetic representation of a scene as opposed to uh, stick figures on a wall. And so you're trying to create an illusion with that chalk or with those oil paints. So I guess magic and or illusion and art are intrinsically connected in a lot of ways. All I do when it comes to experience design and specifically hyperreality design is try to really shine a spotlight on the idea that because I feel like there's that connection between art and magic and art and illusion, that learning more about the craft that is dedicated to illusion design can only amplify your art further.
Mm.
And especially, of course, with hyperreality that I define as it's not just creating a realistic experience; it's an impossible experience. And so much of just going to Disney is that you're trying to live in an impossible experience, right? You get on a ride, but the point of that ride is to place you into a film, and that you couldn't ever literally be put into because it's just a was drawing on cells that were flipped and animated. It's just a really or CGI renderings, and now you're trying to put somebody into that position, and that's impossible to do. But how could we create the illusion that that's actually happening? And so, uh, to me, that the ability to step inside of an illusion and to live in an impossible experience is at the heart of what so much experience design and immersive theater and is all about. That again, it just makes sense to try and apply the lessons of magic and magicians over into that art form in a very tangible and hopefully easy to understand way.
Illusion design and the types of illusions, overt and covert, that those are two big pillars in the book.
Mhm.
Possibly the biggest pillar, the biggest frame, is to get the reader to start thinking in terms, not in terms of hyperreality as a tool for storytelling, but story building. And
Yeah.
I wanted to give you a chance to define that term, and also wanted to know when you started using that term, when you started leaning on that as part of your core lexicon.
So story building, I didn't start using the actual term until much later on, although the thread of what we were trying to do was always there. But as people started using terms like story living and uh, other similar terms like that, I liked it because it was reaching into the heart of what story was trying to accomplish as opposed to storytelling. Um, but to me, storytelling is kind of like that's what the author's trying to do, and then story living, that's what the guest is trying to do. So what happens when those two things come together?
Mm.
And that's for me story building. That's the partnership that you have between the author and the guest. And because if you just try to let the guest create their own experience, things can get off the rails very quickly. And if you just have the author spoon feed the story to the guest, then we already have that medium. We already have that's storytelling, and we have a bunch of different ways of doing that. And as I say in the book, better ways most of the time of doing that than through immersion, because the you as you say in the book, you can't force somebody to look in a certain direction. You can't make up that frame that or even sitting in a theater, like then you got the proscenium is the frame, obviously, and so
Right.
so you're able to create these vignettes and create story and flow and thread that makes sense to the viewer through focalization. But when you step into these immersive experiences, you lose control of that focalization, and now you either need to commit to the partnership or let go of it entirely. And so I just talk a lot about the book about that partnership and how you can create this relationship with the guest that allows them to, with you, build a story together that is both meaningful and impactful, that is both experiential and story driven.
I really like the term because, when I'm trying to describe this work to people, I often talk in terms of there being the center of gravity being between the audience and the author, and there being a tug of war. And immersion being sort of a factor of like where how deep in is it, or do they meet in the middle? And I haven't really had a term for, well, what is it that they're doing when they're pulling on the center of gravity, and this idea that, well, they're story building. That's the tension between these two forces that's kind of
Yeah.
teetering back and forth, and we all know with tug of war, like it ultimately, like it collapses if one side or the other, like gets it too far off, and you don't want that. You want that glorious tension holding on as long as possible and just sort of building.
Yeah, I love
Um,
that lens of tension. I think that's great.
yeah. Um, and some of that, and you get into this towards the end of the book, you cop and you cop to writing this part first when you tackle the project. You get into how story building goes all the way back to D&D and Dungeons and Dragons, and that's definitely something that's been a constant in your life for all kinds of reasons. And D&D is having a moment culturally right now. It was starting to have a moment pre-pandemic, and I think that it even exploded even more because live plays became a way to parasocialize, or just people playing on Zoom with their friends to actually socialize. So, do you feel like we're we're having people who are more literate about the idea of story building, even if they don't necessarily have the terminology behind it?
Absolutely, and that's great news. Uh, I think you've definitely touched on something that was always a big struggle for us at the Void, because we were constantly saying that, well, we're not actually trying to make video games. We're trying to make experiential entertainment where the guest's story is ultimately driven by them, so that when they come out, they're telling their story. And this was a concept that was really important, especially to me in the beginning, because I felt like that it was the future, and I wanted to be part of it. And it was it's been a long road, I guess, to get people to get grown-ups especially to start playing again, right? To feel
Mm.
comfortable with being able to step into a part and to play. And one of the things we tried to do a lot at the Void was um, to give people enough permission and to give people a level of comfort that would allow them to play. It's a lot easier to play one if you're just doing it with your friends and you're not there with strangers, because then you don't have to worry about how they're judging you or what they think about you. And so once you isolate that group and it's just you and your friends going through, and you've really immersed them into the world and the environment, as they get used to that and go down that path of conviction, they become more and more um, comfortable with the idea that they can be something else, or that they can try to push the story and be part of that story and play. Um, and D&D is a lot of that. Is play. And some people, they have different levels of comfort with that. Some people, they get really into it and they're going to come to the D&D meeting in their robes, and they're going to be the great magus whatever, and have an accent the whole time and speak Elvish or whatever. And then you got other people that just sort of sit down nervously, like, can I throw my daggers now? Is that okay? Which die do I roll?
My
But
character
all of
says
that's
this. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
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 My
Yeah.
character says this. We're like, well,
Yeah.
is that you? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I
If you happen to
actually,
be
I
that kind of
don't.
person, no offense, no offense. Just
There's no
very,
offense. No,
very, very, very
it's
different style. But yeah. Yeah.
all of
It's all
that's
fair.
totally acceptable. But
Yeah.
I feel like the longer you play D&D, the more you feel comfortable with the idea of blurring that that area between you and your character and
Yeah.
being able to play more.
It often feels to me like sometimes I wonder if some folks have the actor performer gene and others don't, or if it's just that we get some people, it gets acculturated out of them and other people don't, because looking at something like the Void and thinking of a Void adventure like it's a D&D module makes all the sense in the world to me. Stepping into a character from Jumanji, or stepping into a character, stepping into the role without a name of a Ghostbuster, makes all the sense in the world to me. There are things that you do when you're doing those roles, or there's something very specific if, like, you wake up and you see the rock is staring back at you in the mirror, right? Like
Yeah.
you know what to do. But I was an actor. Like, I was drawn into that
Yeah.
space really early on. Of course it's easy for me. I look at people on the outside going like, what am I supposed to do? And I don't quite get that. Did you see a lot of that as people came to the Void, the Resistance, or are people walking through those doors already self-selecting, already down that path, even before they don a computer backpack?
It's there's, we'd see all different kinds come through.
Yeah.
Often it's because you have a couple of extroverts in a family that would take a couple of introverts in the family, and they would all go together, right?
Right.
And there's a law in the book that says everyone should be having fun, and it's kind of a law that I almost hate telling people that is a law. And to clarify, so in the book there's 52 laws that they originally were called the 52 Void Laws, or the 52 Laws of the Void, and I called them laws because it was important for me and for the Void that when we told our partners these laws, that they understood that these weren't just like mild suggestions, that these were very important to us. Doesn't mean they can't be broken, and we would break them all the time as long as we knew which ones we were breaking and why. But that they needed to be taken seriously before they were broken. And one of them was everyone needs to be having fun, and it seems like the weakest of all the laws. Like, well, okay, everyone's gonna have fun, but the fact is, we took it very seriously. We would sit there and say, okay, what kind of person might be in this experience, and let's go through as them. If I am, uh, a 60-year-old grandmother, 70-year-old grandmother, whatever, going through with her grandchild, and they're going through, what is going to be fun about all of this for her? Uh, if I'm just super into puzzles, but I'm really kind of a pacifist and don't want to shoot anything, but I'm in the experience, what is there for me? And how can I affect my subjective story to fit that narrative of how I identify as that person? Um, and in some experiences, I think we're more successful at doing that than others. And as time went on, I feel like we got better and better at it. But it was something that was always a big part of our design is designing, trying to design in a way for everyone to enjoy the experience and have fun. So even if you're not a big overt dramatic person who can just step into a role, then we tried to take you into account and say, okay, well, here's how you're going to super enjoy this. Uh, and our NPS scores were off the charts. Like we feel like we did a pretty good job of walking that line.
Yeah, there's a Steinbeck quote you have at the start of the book about, the writer having to, meet the reader part of the way. I could look up the exact quote. I think the bookmark right now because I'm going to drop it onto you, but I'm not going to do that for everybody else at the moment. But that thought about, meeting the audience where they are, like that's driving a lot of my thinking about, as this form, be it using the technology of virtual reality or augmented reality, or just using, people and spaces, that there's so much of it starts with that idea of, okay, where are they when they get to us, and where can we take them? Like, we know where we want to take them, but but if you're not aware that you have to meet them where they are when you start, then you're sort of like explaining jokes to people. Like, well, why don't you think this is funny? Don't you get the punchline? And you never set up,
Yeah.
or they weren't born to the culture, and they're just like, I don't know why that's funny. You're just saying things to me. Um, so to see that, right at the top, and also to see Steinbeck saying it, that actually makes some things click for me because of how formative back in high school Steinbeck was for me on a whole lot of levels. Oh, great. That was one of those classic Noah footnotes that is masquerading as a question. So sorry about that. Um,
It's great. It's great.
I mean, did you, to turn this into a question, were these things that came to you through experience, or were these things that were long held convictions because what you had seen early enough in your days as a effects designer, as a magician, as someone who grew up in a household where Dungeons and Dragons was your dad's day job, right? Like, were these things that were just always with you, or did you find them over time?
Yeah. It's a lot like a Slumdog Millionaire or something, right? Where you kind of look back and you go, "Wow, my whole life kind of led up to this book." Um, where when I was been playing D&D since I was a little kid, because it's the household I grew up in. Um, Having a famous D&D author for a father, and and then visual effects had such a big influence on design for the Void, and the resulting commentary in the book, as well as growing up, obviously constantly getting story lessons from my dad. That stuff just sort of, I imagine it's a lot this way for people say, oh yeah, my dad was this. And so I kind of understand it. And I get that. Like you just sort of, whether it's through osmosis or just through a million little lessons over time, these things would sort of sink in. My dad he would do random, these sort of D&D stories when we were on long drives, and we'd each take a character, and we wouldn't have dice. We would just, this is what I'm doing, and then he would say, okay, this is what happens, and I'm going to attack, and we would play out these whole D&D adventures without even rolling dice, because they were all just sort of story and building on the car trip, and you just learn things just from that. And so I learned a lot, obviously from my dad, from story, and my mom's, she's an artist, and is into all sorts of different arts, and growing up, that was a big part of me as well. I mentioned her in the book as
Yeah.
being a big influence on me. So I was very fortunate to have two artistic parents that were very nurturing. So all of that helped. And then jumping into visual effects, that helped. Being a magician from a very young age was obviously a huge help. And then all the different books on magic theory that I'd read were all super important. And I took all of that, and then when we started the Void, started applying lessons where I thought I could from all that information to our work at the Void. And some of the things worked great, and some of the things didn't work at all. And in the book, I even mentioned some of the things that didn't work, that I was just sure were going to be amazing, and did not work. Um, and then the experience of the Void was very eye opening, and my experience at Evermore is very eye opening, designing haunts, and uh, struggling with throughput, and struggling with people not doing what they supposed to be doing. I designed it. Why aren't they doing the thing? And anyway, so all these things really just came together into it's almost like not a moment of my life was wasted if the purpose of my life was to write this book. So I don't know. That maybe makes it sound like the book is way better than it is, because
The
there's still a long way
teleological
for me to go
endpoint,
too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, to act as hype man for a second for the book and for you in this moment, it's been really fun seeing how many people are picking it up in our circles. I was on Blue Sky and mentioned I was reading it. And Serenity Caldwell just jumped in. It was like, oh, it's really good. And this is happening, across the board. There's folks at like the Johnny Carson Center in Lincoln, Nebraska, who are like, "Oh, yep, just finished it," and Scott Stein of CNET is digging into it, and I'm recommending it to people, like particularly folks who I had conversations years ago about the intersection of magic and immersive experience, like folks who are active in the board of the Magic Castle, being like, "Oh, did you know about this one? You should get this one." Or like folks who have had long discourses about experience design and fan engagement, and sort of like pushing it on people, not just because the Void guy's written it, but now having like read through it. I mean, I'm teaching a course at CalArts in the fall, and I'm like, oh man, like there's no textbook for the class, but like I could definitely see like all telling them all like, all right, well, you want to get the cheat codes, go pick up Curtis's book, because you'll race ahead of everybody else. Because it's also just the way things are broken down enough, right? Like you take that time to codify things, and I think a lot of people in this moment are trying to do that across the board, and that makes it a beautiful moment. And I think we're going to see this sort of, there's all these tributaries kind of coming into the river of immersive and experience design, and so much of that's based on we've had this incredible decade worth of work, the work that you've been doing, the work that Punch Drunk was doing. You get folks in all sorts of companies, you get third rail projects out there doing stuff. To that end, you make reference to like a few live action pieces in the book. You also make a reference to some like smaller scale stuff. Like there was a reference to Unchained in here, or Unchained, or is it Chained? I can't remember what Justin called that, but the Christmas Carol one, where you get pulled through the wall, right? Like you make references there. How much of the smaller scale immersive work were you absorbing during the salad days of the Void?
It's good to live so close to Sundance,
That
because
helps.
that's just, it helps a lot. That's up the hill, so we would, every year we head up there and see all the cool immersive experiences and projects there, and we would do that every year, and that was great. And then every now and then I'd make a trip, to go see some certain specific things, but most of the time we're just busy, just trying to make our own stuff that I haven't gone out and seen nearly as much as some of my other peers, other people I know have done, and I'm very jealous of that. But it was, I don't know, it was always really neat seeing those little projects, and especially in those earlier days where everything was, there was just so much new, and experiments, and there's a lot still being done. But I don't know, those early days of uh, putting an Oculus on somebody and trying things out, it was, it was really inspirational and really cool to see. And like I say, I wish I could have seen more of it, but I don't know. I love all forms of immersive entertainment, and honestly, I don't think I've ever been to something immersive where I didn't walk away having learned something.
In the book, you give a fairly in-depth walkthrough of Jumanji: Reverse the Curse. Yeah. And I was so glad you did, because I was lucky enough to experience that, but it was cut short by pandemic. And in that one, I thought you really started to get at some of the social split reality affordances of the platform. I wonder if you could dive in a little here on how your approach to that one as a group experience went, because I got so excited seeing how you were playing with the dynamics of giving characters unique perspectives on the shared space, for instance.
Having like relativistic abilities for different characters is something that, of course, VR particularly is like designed for, and is just so very good at. But we've also had a lot of struggles uh, getting that concept across, because reality doesn't generally work that way. Um, so because we all assume that whatever I see, someone else can see. We're all experiencing the same reality, which is again another subject, because we're not. But in general, we think we are. And so I remember one time when we, in our Wreck-It Ralph experience, we had, I don't remember if I talk about this in the book or not, but we have circles on the floor, and we assigned each guest a place to stand. And so essentially you had Vanellope saying, "Hey, everyone go stand in your circle," or something like that. And we just expected the guests to go find their circle and stand in it. We would only show them their circle. And in playtesting, we just watched this mom next to her son and saying, "Go stand in the circle." And she's pointing over to this blank space of ground. And the kid's like, "I am standing in my circle." And she's like, "No, it's over here." And he's like, "No, Ma." And they got in this big argument. And we were like, "All right, we're going to have to change that." And so from then on, we made it so that all 4 circles for each guest appeared on the ground. Because the just having a relativistic circle for each individual person was confusing.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was
truly
really wild.
What's going? You get a glimpse of what's going in her mind, in that moment, and it can kind of make a little sense. Why is he not in the circle? He should be in the circle. That's the circle. He's always not in the circle, right?
Right, exactly. Oof. Yeah.
Everything you want to know about that family dynamic.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Johnny, get in your circle.
Not
this again.
That's incredible.
So it's good. But so when we did Jumanji, we took sort of a lot of those lessons about relativistics to heart, and it's still tough. Like, it's still, I think, a lesson that we're trying to teach and get across and get people to understand. And in Jumanji, there's a bunch of that. There's someone who can read a language that nobody else can read. There's someone who can talk to animals. There's somebody who can, like, everyone's got their own abilities, right?
Yeah.
And relativistics played a big part of that. And it's tough. It's still difficult to get that idea across to everybody. And so we made it almost part of the critical thought is that this is a dynamic of this world. So hop on board, because that's the only way you're going to make it through without being totally confused. And I think for the most part, we were pretty successful with doing that.
I was really impressed by how it came together. It's one also that felt most like a role-playing module, was having those things, stick, where it's like the party together, only together can the party solve the bigger problem. And that was a very fun dynamic to be part of.
And honestly, Jumanji was kind of our first step down what was going to be a much longer road as we get into the infinite stage, into much longer experiences and everyone having their own sort of class abilities and really pushing kind of down that D&D road much, much further. So hopefully sometime in the future, we'll be able to get back heading down that road, because I want that experience of being in a world for hours and having powers and abilities and living out these long stories. Like, that's just so much. We just never quite got where I wanted to go with the Void previously. And it's just cool stuff that's just waiting to be done.
One last thing before I let you go. Here we are in 2023. We're at this interesting inflection point where, VR and AR are, going through a churn again. Metaverse was hot. Now it's not. The immersive experiences stuff, like it's some of it's going really well, some of it's kind of shaky. How do you feel about across the board, in the art and experience land, where the future of hyperreality is at, or the present of hyperreality is at this particular moment, and maybe that 18 months ahead?
I like things are still trending toward experiential entertainment. There was I think a fear that isolation of the pandemic would actually sort of start to turn that ship. But if anything, I feel like it just got people wanting experience and wanting connection and wanting more socialization. So that's been great. I feel like it's almost, if anything, accelerated the need for these sort of experiences. Especially when it comes to hyperreality, this idea of living impossible experiences or being able to do amazing, incredible things inside of an experiential platform that you could otherwise not have is there's a sense of wonder and amazement that you lose at some point from being a kid to becoming an adult. And it's the most attractive part of magic for me as a magician, is that moment of astonishment, that feeling inside, we're like, whoa, like that disappeared, or what in the world just happened, of not understanding something and not knowing, and feeling like you just saw something miraculous, that can sort of pull you back to that time when you were a kid and you woke up and Santa Claus had come in the morning. And I feel that feeling is such a great little piece of joy, that I love that, and I want to see that in more and more experiences, and I want that to be part of the experiences that people are having in these events, large or small. And it's harder than, it's not done, and sometimes it's done poorly because it's not easy necessarily to do that. But I feel like we should all be trying for that, because there's a real value in that feeling and in that moment that you can give people, that they just, it's something they'd lost that we can give back to them. So that's where I'd like to see it go, and I've seen a little bit of that, and I'd like to see more of it.
Curtis Hickman, co-founder and chief creative officer of The Void, author of Hyperreality, The Art of Designing Impossible Experiences. You'll find all that, folks, in the show notes. Curtis, thank you for being on the show today.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. Once
again, I want to thank Curtis for being our guest on the show today. Hyperreality, The Art of Designing Impossible Experiences. It is a must read for those of you who design impossible experiences. If you're working in immersive, be it particularly if you're in the VR side, the XR side, but even if you're on the live side, check this book out. It is a treasure trove. I am so happy it came out right before I dive into teaching college for the first time. What a godsend. Okay. This is the second version of this because the previous version of this was way too rambly and hedgy. Check it. Want to talk to you a little bit about the combined WGA SAG-AFTRA strike that's going on right now. So SAG is adopting some tactics around the promotion of struck work. And the messaging from SAG has been a little unclear at times. I don't feel uncomfortable saying that because everybody's saying that, but also it has been. It's a little hard to tell what work they're objecting to promoting if it isn't work that's clearly live action work, that's something that just came out. They're also discouraging influencers and podcasters and all sorts of folks from covering anything, doing like rewatches of old shows that are currently on streaming platforms. That is something they're actively doing. Now, look, we don't do rewatch shows. I mean, maybe we should. Not right now, but like in general, maybe. I don't know. We don't do that kind of stuff because we're focused on immersive arts and entertainment. But a big part of that world is the marketing of immersive, of using immersive to market other things, namely film and television. And a lot of people in our space, they make their living for the year doing that kind of work. And right now, SAG is making it pretty clear that folks who do that kind of work, that is promoting struck work, could find themselves never being able to get into SAG if that is their ambition. Now, I'm not running around with any... I mean, look, maybe when I'm older, I'll throw the actor, mode back on or something like that. Like when I have a few less responsibilities in my life and I can get back to my first love. But I'm not concerned for myself about, whether or not, we covered an activation promoting a streaming platform as a whole or a particular show, that it would like affect me. I do worry about some of the people who are in our stable of writers, that maybe that could keep their careers back in the long run. And I also have concerns for the folks who are making it, for the people who are performing in that stuff. So, I would say if you are a member of SAG, and you're looking at, picking up some side work, doing promotions, please talk to your strike captains, talk to your union reps about like what is and what isn't. Have clarity around that. I would also tell that to anyone who is producing any of this stuff. Get clarity around it. Because what you don't want to do is find yourself hobbled in the long term because of what's going on in the short term. Hopefully, though, there's going to be some motion to bring everyone back to the table. There was already some motion earlier in the week for the WGA to, AMPTP was saying, well, hey, WGA, why don't we come back to the table? That could be good. But that was to can we get some committees together to discuss? Committees to discuss, right? And we all know that could be a while. You also have the studio heads out there saying oh yeah, we saved $100 million last month because we didn't make anything. My favorite one was someone said yeah, I saved $15 yesterday because I didn't eat. It ain't sustainable, buddy. Oh boy, seriously. If you're making work, please check and make sure that you're not setting yourself up for a fall. That's number one. Number two, our editorial policy here at No Proscenium for the duration of the SAG-AFTRA strike is that we will not cover activations that are promoting struck work. Full stop. Full stop. Does that cut down on some of the stuff we'd be doing? A bit. Not a huge amount. It depends on how much of this stuff there is. I also don't think there's going to be all that much, but we will be checking. So there may be some things that we're skipping this year because of these terms. I would also encourage anyone else who's covering to take a look at the guidance. It is not applying at the moment to print. That's not something that they've pushed out on, but it's probably just a matter of time before they issue that guidance. Or maybe they'll walk it back. Maybe a week from now, things will have changed. It is a bit hazy. I don't have a full grasp on it. And I've even read I've read the FAQ on podcasting, and honestly, I couldn't quite parse entirely what was and wasn't covered. But I think that has a lot to do with the fact that a lot of it's talking about, well, if it's under this contract or under that contract, and I'm not familiar with those contracts, right? So not fully read in for context, which just makes it a little bit, the safe thing to do is be oh, this show's getting an escape room, right? Nope, not going. Struck work, right? This streamer's doing a promotional event. Nope, not going. Struck work. It's just going to be cleaner in the long run. And hopefully, it also means that the strike resolves faster and we can get everyone back to work, because it's getting miserable on so many levels. And we love cultural production in every way, shape, and form and want to see more of it. So that's what's up with that. Just be mindful. Check your contracts, check your sixes. Don't screw your career up for a short-term game. It's not worth it. It's just not. Life is a long, long slog with plenty of surprises. Don't dig a hole. All right. On that aggressively cheery note, we're going to close this one off. I'm going to get to those calls and get this podcast up. The associate producer for No Proscenium is Parker Sella. Music for No Proscenium is by Chris Porter of the Speakeasy Society and Solar the Podcast. Special thanks to Siobhan O'Loughlin for voicing our intro. This thing is written, edited, hosted, produced, mixed by yours truly. I'm Noah Nilsson. And until next time, I'll see you at the show.